Democracy has been popularly defined as a system of government for the people, by the people, and of the people. However, what happens when these people, for which the government exists, refuse to take part in political activities? What happens to these electorates when they refuse to exercise their voting rights and leave the polls to chance? Now, in 2019, Nigeria's general elections in only Jigawa and Katsina states recorded 50% voter turnout. Despite Lagos being one of the commercial centers of Nigeria and the second most populous state, it recorded the lowest turnout of 18.3% of the registered voters cast their ballots. What could be the solution to this problem? In fact, the main question is, why are we so apathetic to the polls? Well, joining us to discuss this is Paul James. He is Programs Manager for Elections in YIAGA. Thank you so much, Mr. James, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Always a pleasure. So I think the most obvious question here is, how ready are we for the next elections? Because that's all we're talking about. That's all we've been talking about since last year. And this is the campaign season. A lot of things have changed. Mr. President has signed the bill into law, and everything is supposed to start going, from here. Do you think that we are ready? And when I say we, I'm talking about INEC, I'm talking about us, the people, I'm talking about political parties. You have been observing elections for years. Where do you think we stand?
Well, I think the process is just starting for the 2023, starting because we just got the bill signed into law on the 25th, and then INEC on the 28th issued officially notice of elections, meaning from Monday the 28th of February, if you count, we got about 363 days to the next election. So 1 year to plan, 1 year for all engagement. But over and beyond that, before now, there have been other series of engagement, especially on the part of citizens, the voter registration exercise, which is supposed to be a prerequisite for participating in an election. The process has been ongoing since INEC resumed the continuous voter registration in July of 2021. Here we are in July of 2021. It's almost like we're still in the same year. But here we are looking forward to 2022. What are the issues? Of course, I heard you alluded to the concerns around voter apathy. Now, voter apathy does not only manifest in election day. Voter apathy even begins before the election. Before the election in the areas of, for instance, voter registration, participation begins from the day a voter goes to register to vote. Participation is not just when people go to vote on election day. That is just like one bit of the entire cycle of participation in the electoral spectrum. So what has been happening? Voter registration on INEC started, and then, a bit of engagement here and there, a bit of push is happening from the stakeholders to get people to go to register to vote. I know there are some concerns, some challenges that have been raised. Some concerns that have been raised as regard challenge of participation. We can interrogate them, dissect them, but then also we cannot take to chance. We cannot live. We cannot continue to wallow in the same with the same tenure concerns that have been developed other engagements. This is the opportunity. 360 days to the next cycle of election. A lot needs to happen. A lot needs to be done. I know the concern has always often been about the political choices. If voters don't participate on election, there's several reasons. They come up with several reasons, but one I know is political choices. Now, based on the new Electoral Act, INEC has started the process. Political party primaries are supposed to be conducted and concluded at least 180 days before the next cycle of election, meaning between now and say the end of June this year, that process should have been concluded. Now, voters have a choice, have a chance also to start putting an eye on how these processes happen, because it is from the party primaries that we get the candidate that emerge as the candidate that will be voted in the general election. So when people wait until the end to begin to raise those concerns, I will put the blame on them. We have the opportunity to change the narrative. If the old guard, if
But
people
then,
feel they are
but
not
then, but
happy.
then the average, I'm going to serve as the voice of the average person that you're referring to, would say, well, we want to change the old guard to the new guard, but it looks like we don't necessarily have a voice. I'm one of those people who keeps saying, you do have a voice. Your votes is your power. But then there are people who tell you that these votes don't count, and that's why they don't even bother. Somebody has shown me their voter card and said, I've never taken it anywhere. I just use it to open a bank account, or if I ever need something to identify myself with. And it made me really sad. So how do you even start to convince that type of person who has given up totally on the political system in the country?
Well, it will have been interesting to know what your response was to that voter. But the point is, of course, that voter card is the access they need for everything. If that voter card doesn't have value, the politicians will not be coming to buy them off the voters. Now, this is because our electoral processes are getting better, whether we like it or not. Here we know in this country in the past, the practice has been to approach INEC officials to buy or to manipulate the process using INEC officials. But now what the politicians do is to go and buy votes off the voter to vote for them. If the process is not getting better, vote buying will not be increasing. So we need to take note of that. What has happened to make the process better? We have seen the gradual introduction of technologies in our elections. We have seen, for instance, the Edo and Ondo election in 2020, where at the end of the election, INEC results were uploaded online. Everybody can see the outcome of the elections from the polling unit level. Result transmission has been the black hole in our election. Now we've got a new electoral act that has legalized some of these processes. One is concerned around electronic accreditation of voters. One is also the concern about how do you determine overvoting in an election. I know it has been the concern people have raised in the past. For instance, if you recall, we've got INEC officials that said they were forced to declare election results under duress in Imo in 2019, for instance. So when you have election happen in such atmosphere, it affects voter confidence in the process. Now you have a new electoral act that says if such happen, INEC can review elections that are conducted under duress. And then also, I mentioned the point about electronic accreditation of voters. At the end of the election, when you look at overvoting, it's going to be determined by the actual number of people that come out to vote that are accredited. And not what we used to have in the past, where overvoting is determined by the number of registered voters, which we know, and you agree with me, that it's not everybody that is registered that will come out to vote on election day. In fact, if you go by the 2019 election, 84 million Nigerians registered in that election according to INEC data. 72 million collected at PVC. So if we are using the whole logic, it means people will be counting turnout based on the number of registered voters, 84 million, and not the actual people that collected at PVC. Now, based on this current act, turnout will be determined by the actual people that are accredited. So at the end of the accreditation process, this is uploaded on INEC server. When elections are done with and results are announced, comparison will be done based on the votes that are cast at the polling unit and the number that are accredited. Where the number of votes that are cast at the polling unit is more than or is at variance with the number accredited, the results for the polling unit will be cancelled. So if a voter is empowered with such information, they will begin to know that there will be more demand of the voter by the politician in 2023. And this is where the voter needs to be properly educated to understand their political choices. Let it not be an episodic engagement. If the politician will come to them with the usual promises, let us begin to think of how to concretize these processes, how to concretize these promises.
I like how you've taken us to voter education. For the media, it's our job partially. I mean, I know it's a shared responsibility. Political parties have a responsibility. INEC does have a responsibility. The NOA, which is half past dead, I must say, I haven't heard from the NOA. We're hoping that they would come alive before the year is over, hopefully. And people like you, YIAGA, civil societies have their job cut out for them. But how much voter education is really out there? And I'm not just talking about me calling you on the show to have this conversation. I'm talking about community engagement, how much of it is out there? Because we keep saying, oh, the people need to have this information, but who's arming them with this information? I'm one person, you're one person, YIAGA has a handful of people. How much are we putting in to educate these people?
Well, I think we need to deconstruct this concept of voter education. We need to demystify voter education. There is voter education, there is voter information. Voter education is when you begin to talk to people, especially about their political choices, how to get a political party, how to set up a movement, and all of that. Voter information, point them to where to go to register to vote, and information about polling units, that's where to go register to vote, and then dates of the election and all of that. Now, there are a lot of other concerns, but we must deal with the basics. At the moment, the bigger issue is that we need to get people to first go get registered. And then the other concerns around political choices, location of polling units, I think as event unfolds, then those engagement also need to happen. I'm bringing this up because there are other things also that constitute a clog in the wheel of participation. One that we see is even access to polling units. INEC in recent time have decided to expand polling units from the 119,973 that we used to have. They have increased the number of polling units to 176,000, meaning there are new locations that some voters are not even aware of. I give you a case in point. It's the FCT election that happened in February, where INEC expanded polling units from 562 to 2,822. There were about 593 polling units in Abuja that had zero voter on election day, meaning election did not happen in those locations. So as part of the voter information, these are things that we need to start letting voters know, that it is also not enough to just have your PVC. You also need to be sure to understand where to go vote on election day. They can engage INEC. If INEC is not ready to come talk to us, we need to go to INEC. We don't necessarily have to wait if we truly understand the value of this participation. So the first and the second, first is to register. Second is to be concerned even about the location of this polling unit. The third point for me is to understand also the options before the voter. If people are coming, what had happened in the national, I'm in a meeting somewhere in Kano today, and then I've also been keeping an eye on what happened in the National Assembly, especially when they voted about inclusion of women, for instance, in political processes. So, I know that didn't pass through. That is inclusive for women in the in the House of Assembly. That didn't pass through. As I was very sad when I had that information. But then, women also have the chance to make their voice heard in this election. They can organize, they can support a woman candidate. They don't necessarily have to wait for the men to continue to shape the narrative. We have seen people that have contested an election on zero budget. It has happened. We had somebody in Kenya. Even in the First Republic, we've heard about politicians that spent less to participate in elections. So I think we might think 360 days is a long shot, but I think if they begin the engagement now, look for credible women with capacity, with competence, with character that they think can best represent their interests, and begin to see how they can organize other women to support this interest and see how they can push the number of women participation up. For me, at the end of the election, I will look back and say, did we have a better election that promotes inclusion, especially inclusion of women?
Let's talk about other deterrents, things that might make people not want to show up for the elections or even deter them in any way. Issues like political violence. We've seen a lot of that. In fact, our elections has continuously been colored and marred by these violences. We've also seen the insecurity in so many places. Again, Anambra is a very good example. We saw those people in Anambra State defy the odds, even when people were afraid that, the turnout would be almost zero. They defied the odds and came out. But that might not be the case for the people in the Northeast or even in the Northwest as we speak. So how do we, like you said, we have less than 365 days to address these issues. Is there any magic that can happen in terms of security? But then the issue of violence, I do not necessarily see 50-year-olds or 60-year-olds, perpetrating these acts of violence. It's still the young persons. Have we not, well, let me say, have we come of age to realize that we've been used as a pawn in the game for this long? And do you think that maybe a lot more young people have come to their senses, or are we just talking gibberish?
We're not talking gibberish. Now, this is, our politics is evolving. Our people are beginning to understand some of these issues. And going back to the question you raised earlier about voter education, this is where this voter education is mostly needed. Needed because we are beginning to see violence weaponized in our elections. Reflect back and see some of the elections that were conducted in the recent past, and then how some areas that were declared as hotspots before the election suddenly turned out to green, if you like, on election day. That election happened with zero violence recorded in those locations. Now, what the politicians are beginning to do is to begin to instill fear in the minds of the voter. Like I had said, because the process is getting better, locations where voters don't go to vote are locations where results are manipulated, where elections are manipulated. Now, what do voters need to know or do is to begin to understand this narrative, this new narrative that we're seeing in our election. We saw it in Edo in 2020. Edo had 18 local governments in the build-up to the election. YIAGA Africa deployed observers over a course of 3 months before the election. And for every week that we receive reports, the indicators we got in the build-up to the election were that 12 of the 18 local governments were riddled with every form of pre-election violence. We went into under election in the same 2020. The same tactics, 13 of 18 local governments were riddled with different forms, some different shades of pre-election violence. Now we went to Anambra, the same narrative, election-related concerns, election-related violence. But election happened in all of those places. I mean, we saw the turnout from these elections, not something that we're all happy or proud of, because if you have a few percentage determining who becomes the governor, for instance, of the state, then, of course, it raises a moral question. Are you going to challenge a leader that you know you did not really appoint, elect, come out to vote for on election day? But again, we should also understand that there is participation is both ways. Whether we come out to vote on election day, we don't come out to vote, we have participated. Like I said, the moment you pick up your PVC, the process has started. So we don't limit it to only when people come out to vote. We make choices either ways, but we can change the narrative and begin to actually come out to vote so that we can see how we can push these bad elements out. Elections again are getting better. We should not be deterred with these issues. No election is perfect, but then we can make the best of what we have.
I want to say thank you. Paul James is the program manager of elections in YIAGA. Thank you so much for speaking with us. We're hoping that all these conversations will be had on and off the air, and of course, even at the community level. Hopefully, we're able to touch and reach as many people as we can.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, thank you all for staying with us as we round up today's show with Street Views. In today's package, we hear from Nigerians who are groaning about the fuel scarcity. I'm sure that you're feeling the scourge too. Well, my name is Mary Ann Okon. I will be back tomorrow talking for development. Have a good evening.
Government should do something to this fuel scarcity because it cannot continue like this. Because people will suffer for it. People are suffering for it.
Things are bad because of that scarcity of fuel. People cannot move to one another to do their own business. So if they can do something about it.
I traveled to Mercy on Saturday. There is no NNPC filling station self-fuel from Ikodu to Ekiti. Our leader, they know where Nigeria is today. We are sleeping with fear. We are running on fear. We dey filling station on fear. This is not, it's not supposed to be like that.
By now we should be talking about building and restoring our infrastructures. The major one there is the refinery. So if you want to see any sincere government, they have to put our refineries back to workable position. This is unforgiving for all the leaders of Nigeria. We're talking about a nation over 200 million without a refinery. We probably have to go back to the likes of Qatar, to the likes of Dubai, nations that are on their knees in the early 70s, late 70s, even early 80s, begging us.
Drivers find it harder to get petrol, and as a result, bus fares are higher. And also at home, to get petrol for your generator is a bit harder now and more expensive. If we do not import petrol, if we make our petrol, there will probably be better ways of ensuring the quality is good.
I hope the people here will listen, the people who distribute the fuel, and at least they will do the needful. We don't have to make life difficult for each other. I think they can do better.